The courtroom was eerily quiet, save for the soft shuffle of papers and the occasional murmur of whispers that echoed throughout the polished, cold walls. The gallery of spectators held their breath as Elon Musk, billionaire entrepreneur and the mind behind Tesla, SpaceX, and countless other revolutionary ventures, made his way to the defendant's table. His presence, as always, was magnetic, an aura of calm confidence cloaking him like a protective shield. Today, though, something seemed different. Musk was not in his usual black suit, the one that commanded attention for its minimalist elegance. Instead, he wore a simple, dark blazer that matched the mood of the room. His hands were folded on the table in front of him, and his eyes seemed to gaze past the judge, the lawyers, and the media, all of them just background noise to him at this moment. The one thing that did stand out was the silver cross hanging from his neck, glinting softly in the courtroom lights. The judge, a stern woman in her mid-50s, looked up from her papers and fixed her gaze on Musk. The courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence, waiting for the judge's next move. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, narrowed as they moved over Musk's attire. She cleared her throat. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her every word obeyed, "I'm afraid your choice of personal expression today is problematic." A collective tension filled the air, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The camera crews, perched behind the barriers with their lenses trained on Musk, shifted their focus slightly, capturing every moment of this unexpected turn in the proceedings. Musk remained unfazed. His face, always one to hide his thoughts behind a veil of composure, showed no sign of concern. His fingers, lightly drumming against the table, gave the only hint that his mind was engaged, calculating, evaluating, perhaps preparing a response. The judge continued, her tone even but firm. "Wearing religious symbols in public is not something to be taken lightly, especially in this courtroom. It can be seen as an attempt to sway public opinion or make a statement that goes beyond the purpose of this legal proceeding." A ripple of murmurs spread through the courtroom, a wave of confusion and surprise sweeping over the spectators. Musk, the man who had revolutionized entire industries, was being accused of flaunting his faith in the most inappropriate place possible, the courtroom. The judge's voice broke through the tension. "Therefore, I am issuing a fine for this offense. The fine will be $1,000 for the violation of public decorum." The silence was deafening. Musk, who had been known to handle high-stakes business negotiations with ease, was now being fined for wearing a cross. The absurdity of the situation seemed to settle over him like a heavy blanket, but his face betrayed no emotion. Instead, he merely nodded slightly, acknowledging the judge's ruling. But something in the courtroom's energy shifted. It wasn't just the media, the people watching, the ones who followed Musk's every move, who were intrigued. It was everyone in the room, from the seasoned lawyers to the court staff, who began to wonder, what was Musk's next move? The judge looked down at her papers, expecting a quick surrender. But Musk, ever unpredictable, raised his hand slightly. A signal for attention. His voice, calm and measured, broke the tension. "Your Honor," he said, his words drawing the courtroom's full attention, "I understand that you feel my cross is out of place. But let me be clear, I wear this symbol not to make a statement or seek attention, but because it represents something far greater than me or this case. It's not a symbol of defiance, but a reminder of resilience. A reminder that some things, like freedom of expression, are not for sale." The courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence again, as all eyes turned to the judge. There was no dramatic flair in Musk's voice, no anger or emotion. Just the same cool, calculated demeanor that had made him a business icon. The words hung in the air, unanswered, as the judge took a long, deliberate pause. But in that pause, the question everyone was thinking seemed to pulse in the room: was this just a man of tech genius or something more? Was he about to turn the tables in a way no one could predict? The judge cleared her throat, finally breaking the silence. "Mr. Musk, your remarks are noted, but they do not change the ruling." She glanced down at the legal document before her and then back at Musk. "You will pay the fine, or we will proceed with further consequences." Musk didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes briefly glancing down at the cross around his neck. He adjusted it slightly, as if it had suddenly taken on a new significance in that moment. "I'll be happy to pay the fine," he said, his voice unwavering, "but I'd like to challenge you on this in a different manner. I'd like to see if you're ready for what happens when this turns into a broader conversation." The judge, visibly caught off guard by the calm challenge in his voice, raised an eyebrow. The air in the room seemed to thicken, as though everyone present could feel the impending shift, but no one could predict its direction. The media teams shifted in their seats, adjusting their cameras to capture the next moves, understanding instinctively that this was more than just a legal case, it was a battle for something far bigger than a simple fine. "Mr. Musk," the judge replied, her voice tight, "you're skating on thin ice. This courtroom is not a place for games or stunts." Musk's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, as if he had expected this response all along. He wasn't a man to be easily intimidated, and everyone could sense that. There was a knowing in his eyes, a quiet confidence that made it clear he had only just begun. As the room waited for the next word to come, it was impossible not to wonder, what would Musk do next? And so, the story began. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This case might just spark a new beginning in legal history. What's one thing you would do if your rights were questioned like this? The courtroom had gone silent, but for Elon Musk, this was just another day of facing an audience that thought they understood him. He knew what they saw when they looked at him, a billionaire tech mogul, a visionary with an unshakable confidence that led him to reshape industries like automotive, space exploration, and even artificial intelligence. The public perception of Musk had always been that of a man who could bend the future to his will, someone who was far too focused on the tech revolution to ever be distracted by something as personal as religion or faith. But that wasn't the whole story. To truly understand why Musk had stood so calmly in the face of a $1,000 fine for wearing a cross, one had to look back at the man behind the tech empire, a man who, in many ways, had been shaped by a childhood of loneliness, hardship, and a search for meaning that had never quite stopped. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Musk grew up in a world that didn't always seem to understand him. His father, Elon Musk, a talented engineer and electromechanical technician, had always been distant and critical, a man whose tough love often felt like an emotional barrier rather than a source of support. His mother, May Musk, was a model and dietitian who had her own struggles, but she was a more understanding and nurturing figure in Elon's life. From a young age, Musk had always been drawn to ideas and concepts that other kids found strange. He read books voraciously, science fiction, biographies of great inventors, and, later, books on philosophy and psychology. His classmates, however, found him odd. He was taller than most, a bit awkward, and had a fierce curiosity that wasn't always appreciated in a small South African school. His peers often teased him, but Musk simply retreated into the worlds created by the books he devoured. The bullies in his school would often call him names or push him around. They didn't understand his passion for science, for the future. And to make matters worse, his family life wasn't exactly a source of comfort. His father's constant criticisms and emotional distance only added to the alienation Musk already felt. There were times when he would retreat to his room, turning to books or spending hours tinkering with gadgets and inventions that seemed to make more sense to him than the world around him. It wasn't until a tragic event in Musk's life that he would come to terms with the significance of faith. At the age of 15, his parents divorced, a breaking point that sent Musk into an emotional spiral. It was during this time of turmoil that he lost one of his closest friends, a young boy named Andrew, in a sudden car accident. The loss shook Musk to his core, and it was in the midst of this grief that he began to seek something deeper, something beyond technology or science to make sense of the world. He didn't turn to science for comfort at that moment. Instead, he turned to faith. Though his father was openly critical of religion, and Musk had never been a particularly devout person, he found solace in the idea of something greater than himself. The cross, in particular, resonated with him during that dark time. It was a symbol of suffering, but also of hope, a reminder that through even the worst tragedies, there was always the possibility of resurrection, of renewal. His journey into spirituality wasn't a dramatic, overt transformation, but a quiet, personal one. A way to cope with the uncertainty of life, the failure of his family, and the terrifying sense of helplessness that had come with losing a friend. From that point on, Musk wore the cross, not as a statement for the world, but as a small, private gesture of strength and resilience. It wasn't about religious dogma, it was about what the symbol represented: survival, rebirth, and the unwavering belief that the impossible could be achieved. This was the same belief that drove his work in tech, an unyielding faith in the idea that humanity could overcome its limitations and reach for the stars. As he grew older and became a successful entrepreneur, the cross never left him. It was always there, a quiet reminder of the challenges he had overcome and the ones still ahead. He didn't wear it for others to see, he wore it for himself. The cross had become something that reminded him of his purpose, his mission, and the idea that faith and logic could coexist. His personal beliefs, while private, informed much of his drive, driving him to push forward even when the road seemed impossibly difficult. But as Musk's fame grew, so did the scrutiny. People who admired his boldness and ambition often failed to see the man behind the empire. They saw a man who made headlines for his space missions and electric cars, not a man who had fought personal battles to get where he was. The media portrayed him as an enigmatic genius, often focusing more on his eccentricities than his deeper motivations. Many believed that Musk was simply a modern-day Tony Stark, a brilliant inventor who cared only about his next big idea. But those closest to him knew better. There was more beneath the surface than the world realized. Musk had been through enough hardship to understand that nothing, whether it be technology, fame, or wealth, was permanent. In fact, it was his understanding of impermanence, the knowledge that life was fragile and fleeting, that kept him grounded. The cross wasn't just a religious symbol, it was a personal talisman, a source of inner strength that reminded him that no matter what happened in his career or his life, he could weather the storm and emerge stronger. When he walked into that courtroom, with all the eyes of the world upon him, it wasn't just the cross around his neck that made a statement, it was everything it stood for. The struggles, the loss, the victories, and the never-ending quest for meaning that had shaped him as a person. The cross was his anchor, a reminder that in the face of adversity, there was always a path forward. And today, that path was going to involve not just his defense against a fine, but his defense of something much bigger, the right to express himself, no matter how the world perceived it. As the courtroom buzzed with anticipation, Musk knew that this was no longer about a simple legal case. It was about freedom, the freedom to be oneself, to wear one's beliefs proudly, and to stand tall in the face of those who sought to suppress personal expression. And while many may have doubted him, Musk was ready for the battle that lay ahead. The courtroom had settled into a thick atmosphere of unease. The judge, still somewhat taken aback by Musk's calm defiance, took a moment to collect herself. The case had already shifted from a simple fine for wearing a cross into something more complex, something that could have lasting implications far beyond this one trial. Musk, for all his reputation as a tech visionary and eccentric billionaire, was now emerging as an unlikely figurehead in a conversation about individual freedoms and expression. Outside the courtroom, media outlets were already buzzing with the story, spinning headlines and soundbites. Musk had been fined, but he hadn't backed down. In fact, he had challenged the legal system, the judge, and the very framework of what could or could not be worn in a courtroom. The world was watching, and everyone seemed to wonder, what would happen next? Inside the courtroom, the silence felt oppressive. The judge, clearly frustrated by Musk's defiance, tapped her gavel lightly. "Mr. Musk, I understand that you wish to make a statement, but this is not the place for it. I've made my ruling, and I expect compliance. The fine is not negotiable." Musk remained calm, his posture never shifting. His fingers lightly brushed over the cross hanging from his neck once more, but this time, there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, determination. It was clear now that the issue wasn't the fine. It wasn't even the cross itself. What was at stake was something bigger. Musk was willing to face whatever legal ramifications came next to make his point clear. Freedom of expression was worth fighting for, even in a place as rigid and formal as a courtroom. His lawyer, James Porter, a sharp and seasoned litigator with a reputation for handling high-profile cases, leaned in close to Musk. "Elon," he whispered, "you're making this harder than it needs to be. If you just pay the fine, we can move on from this. The media frenzy will die down, and we can continue with your business." Musk didn't respond immediately, his eyes still focused on the judge. His mind was elsewhere, on the broader implications of what was unfolding. He had seen countless situations where individuals were forced to suppress their beliefs, their identities, their rights, all in the name of societal norms. But this was different. This wasn't just about the cross, it was about the principle of standing up for something, even when the consequences were unclear. "I can't just pay it, James," Musk said quietly, but with an undeniable edge of resolve. "This is about more than a fine. It's about who we are as individuals, the freedom to live as we see fit, to express ourselves without fear of being punished for it. If I let this slide, it sets a precedent. What's next? A fine for wearing a t-shirt with a message someone doesn't like? Or maybe a fine for not adhering to an arbitrary dress code?" Porter sighed, glancing at the judge, who was clearly growing impatient. "I understand, but you're creating a legal battle. The question is whether you're prepared to go all the way. We're talking about public perception, legal consequences, and the risk of escalating this beyond just a simple fine." "I'm prepared," Musk replied, his voice firm. "If I back down now, it will send the message that we can be controlled, that we can be silenced, just for expressing our beliefs. And I won't let that happen. Not on my watch." The tension in the room was palpable. The judge, having heard the exchange, was growing frustrated. "Mr. Musk, you are in contempt of court. I have given you my ruling, and you are not above the law. If you continue to defy my authority, there will be consequences." Musk's gaze never faltered. "I'm not defying your authority, Your Honor. I'm simply exercising my right to stand up for what I believe in. That's all. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm just asking for the freedom to be who I am, as we all should." The judge narrowed her eyes, her face hardening. "This is not the time or place for a philosophical debate. I suggest you take this matter seriously, Mr. Musk, because the consequences of defiance are real." The room seemed to hold its collective breath. A sense of impending conflict loomed in the air, thicker than ever before. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it. This case was no longer just about a fine. It was a battle over deeper issues, and Musk had chosen to stand his ground. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy continued to grow. The headlines screamed, "Elon Musk defies court, refuses to pay fine for wearing a cross." Twitter exploded with opinions from all sides. Some supported Musk, praising him for his courage and commitment to personal freedoms. Others were outraged, calling him disrespectful to the court and questioning whether he was using his platform for self-serving purposes. Among the noise, the words, "freedom of expression," were repeated again and again. And in the background, there was another question forming: what would this mean for future legal cases, for public figures, for everyday people? Back in the courtroom, the judge's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Mr. Musk," she said, "if you refuse to comply, I will have no choice but to hold you in contempt of court, which could lead to further legal actions. Are you prepared to take this step?" Musk stood up slowly, meeting the judge's eyes with unwavering resolve. His response was simple, but powerful. "Yes, Your Honor. I am." The gavel came down, but it wasn't a simple end to the matter. It felt like the beginning of something much larger, a shift that had the potential to redefine the boundaries of individual rights, freedom of expression, and the intersection of personal beliefs and the law. Outside the courtroom, the world was watching, and the question on everyone's mind was, where would this battle go from here? The tension in the courtroom hung in the air like an electrical charge, crackling with an intensity that seemed to ripple outward, beyond the walls of the small, sterile room. Musk's refusal to back down had ignited a firestorm in the media, but it had also begun to stir a sense of something deeper. The world was now paying attention, not just to the legal case at hand, but to the underlying question of what freedom truly meant in modern society. Musk had always been a man driven by big ideas. His ventures into space, electric cars, and AI were all examples of how he saw the world not for what it was, but for what it could be. And now, he was going to make the world see this case the same way. In the days following the courtroom showdown, Musk's legal team worked around the clock to prepare their case. But it wasn't just about winning a legal battle anymore, it was about making a statement, not just for him, but for anyone who had ever felt marginalized or silenced for their beliefs. And Musk knew this was his chance to take on the system, not just to fight for personal freedom, but to force the world to reckon with how far people were willing to go to protect their rights. The media storm had grown exponentially, with pundits and influencers on both sides of the argument taking to social media, debating the ethics of Musk's actions. Some praised his resolve, calling him a champion for free expression. Others criticized him for being reckless, accusing him of using his position of power to make a mockery of the law. But Musk didn't let the noise distract him. In fact, it fueled him. Late one evening, while walking through the halls of his private office, Elon sat alone in his thoughts, staring at a map of the world pinned to the wall, a map that marked the places where SpaceX had launched rockets, where Tesla had opened new production lines, and where he had made his mark on the world. But now, for the first time in his career, it wasn't about rockets or electric cars. It was about something more fundamental, the fight for individual freedom. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was James Porter, his lawyer, holding a thick binder of legal documents. "Elon," he began, taking a seat across from him, "we've been working on the legal arguments for your appeal. We're ready for the next stage of this battle." Musk nodded but didn't seem entirely focused on the paperwork in front of him. His mind was on the bigger picture. "James, this isn't just about a courtroom. It's about the message we're sending. What if we make this bigger than the case? What if we make it a movement?" Porter raised an eyebrow, a mix of skepticism and curiosity on his face. "A movement? What do you mean?" Elon leaned forward, his voice quiet but intense. "What if we take this case beyond the courtroom? What if we start a campaign for people to stand up for their right to express themselves? This isn't just about wearing a cross. It's about the freedom to be who you are, to live without the constant fear of being judged, punished, or silenced for it. If we win this, we could change the way the world views personal freedom. If we lose, we'll have at least made a statement that people can't ignore." Porter took a moment to process Musk's words. He could see the fire in his eyes. This wasn't just about winning a case anymore. It was about changing the conversation around freedom in a way that few had ever done before. "This could get complicated," Porter warned. "If we go down this road, we're not just fighting the legal system. We'll be taking on cultural norms, media narratives, and public opinion. Are you sure you want to go this route?" Musk didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. This is bigger than me. This is about everyone who feels like they don't have a voice. Who else can do this if not me? I've got the platform, the resources, and the determination. I won't back down." And just like that, a new strategy began to take shape. Musk knew that this wasn't just about the cross anymore, it was about something far larger, the very essence of individual rights in a society that increasingly valued conformity over authenticity. As Musk began to formulate his plan, he began making public appearances, not just for the legal case, but to speak directly to the public about the importance of standing up for personal freedom. He gave interviews, wrote op-eds, and even began incorporating his message into his public speeches at SpaceX and Tesla events. Slowly but surely, Musk was building momentum. People were beginning to rally around his cause, and the world was taking notice. In one particularly heated televised interview, Musk was asked about the growing criticism of his actions. "Do you believe it's your position as a billionaire that gives you the right to defy the law in such a blatant way?" the interviewer asked, his tone sharp. Musk didn't flinch. It's not about being a billionaire. It's about being a human being. Everyone should have the right to express who they are, without fear of retribution. If the law says I can't wear a cross, then the law needs to be challenged. I'm just using my platform to do what's right. The response sent shockwaves through the media. People from all walks of life, entrepreneurs, artists, everyday citizens, began to voice their support. Some even started wearing crosses, not because of any religious belief, but as a show of solidarity with Musk's fight. #WearTheCross became a trending hashtag. It wasn't just about faith, it was about freedom of expression and personal identity. Musk had ignited something much bigger than he had originally imagined. Despite this groundswell of support, there was still a growing tension in the courtroom. The judge, unwilling to let the case slip into something more politically charged, had already set a new hearing date to deal with Musk's refusal to pay the fine. But this time, it wasn't just Musk who would stand in the dock. It was the idea of personal freedom itself that would be on trial. As the hearing approached, Musk's resolve only hardened. He wasn't just going to defend the right to wear a cross. He was going to defend the very principle that allowed people to be themselves, unapologetically. The world was watching, and Musk knew that what happened next would echo far beyond the confines of the courtroom. The days leading up to the next hearing felt like an eternity. The media frenzy was at a boiling point, and public opinion was split down the middle. On one side, there were those who saw Musk as a hero for standing up for his rights, someone who was unafraid to challenge the status quo. On the other, critics argued that his refusal to comply with the law was arrogant, disrespectful, and dangerous. But Musk wasn't interested in what the media thought. The days and nights spent in preparation for his next courtroom battle were consuming him. He spent hours going over legal precedents, historical cases of civil disobedience, and even philosophical treatises on personal freedom. The more he read, the more he became convinced that this case was bigger than just him. It was a moment in history that would reverberate far beyond the courtroom doors. The night before the hearing, Musk sat alone in his office, staring out at the city below. The lights of Los Angeles twinkled beneath him, the very same city that had been the backdrop to so many pivotal moments in his life. His mind wandered to the places that had shaped him, the harsh realities of Silicon Valley, the tireless work to build his companies, the long nights spent building rockets and electric cars. He thought of his family, his children, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. But most of all, he thought about the fight that lay ahead. He wasn't just fighting for his right to wear a cross. He was fighting for something deeper, the right to exist as an individual in a world that often seemed determined to push everyone into a narrow box. The world of technology and business had taught him that if you wanted to make a real difference, you had to take risks, risks that could change the entire course of history. This was no different. His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was James Porter, his trusted lawyer, who had been working tirelessly on the case. "Elon," Porter began, looking worn but determined, "we've got to be prepared for whatever happens tomorrow. The judge has already shown her frustration, and if you refuse to pay the fine again, things could escalate quickly. We're not just talking about a fine anymore, contempt of court charges could be on the table." Musk turned, his expression calm yet intense. "I'm not worried about the fine, James. I'm worried about what happens if I back down. What kind of world are we creating where people are fined or punished for simply being themselves?" Porter sat down across from him, eyeing him carefully. "I get it, Elon. But sometimes the law doesn't give us the luxury of making a stand. Sometimes, we have to play the game in order to win. You're an icon. People look to you to solve problems, to think outside the box. But this is different. This isn't one of your startups. This is a system that's been in place for centuries." Elon's gaze never wavered. "The system doesn't define us, James. We define the system. And if we don't stand up now, if we let them win this battle, it's not just about a cross anymore. It's about everything we value, freedom, individuality, and the courage to challenge what we know is wrong." Porter took a deep breath. I've always admired your conviction, Elon. But there's no going back if you do this. You're stepping into the unknown, and the consequences could be severe. Elon didn't respond immediately. He simply stared out the window, lost in thought. The weight of his decision was starting to settle in, but in that moment, something inside him clicked. He understood now. The fight wasn't just about a legal case. It was about the right to be unapologetically yourself. It was about breaking free from the shackles of societal norms that sought to limit individuality and suppress self-expression. I'm ready, Musk said quietly, turning to face his lawyer. We're not just fighting for a cross. We're fighting for the future. This is bigger than a courtroom. This is bigger than me. This is about the world we want to build. Porter nodded, a mix of admiration and concern in his eyes. Then let's get ready. Tomorrow, it all comes down to this. The next morning, as Musk walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere felt different. The weight of the moment was palpable, the air heavy with anticipation. The media had gathered outside, and social media was ablaze with hashtags, live feeds, and commentary. Musk's defiance had sparked a global conversation, and people from all walks of life were watching. The judge entered, her stern face betraying none of the internal conflict she might have been feeling. She had been following the media frenzy closely, and it was clear that the pressure was mounting on both sides. Mr. Musk, the judge began, her voice firm, I've given you ample time to comply with the court's order. If you continue to refuse to pay the fine, you will face contempt of court charges. This is your final warning. Musk stood tall, unflinching. Your Honor, he said calmly, I'm not refusing to pay a fine. I'm standing up for something much bigger. I'm standing up for the right to be who I am, to express myself freely. This cross is not just a symbol of my faith. It's a symbol of my right to exist as I choose. And if the law punishes me for that, then I will take that punishment. But I will not back down. The room was silent. The tension hung in the air like a thick fog. For the first time, the judge seemed uncertain. She glanced at the court reporters, the media, and then back at Musk. She could feel the emotional weight of the moment, the sheer conviction in Musk's words. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was an ideological one, a clash of values that had the power to shape the future. The judge began, but her voice faltered. She paused, looking around the courtroom as if seeking guidance. But the room was silent, and the eyes of the world were upon her. The emotional climax had arrived. Musk had done it. He had pushed the conversation to the breaking point. The question wasn't whether he would win the case, it was whether the world would change because of it. The judge exhaled slowly, looking at Musk with a newfound respect. We will continue this hearing tomorrow. I expect both sides to come prepared for a deeper examination of these issues. Musk nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle within him. This was far from over. But for the first time, it felt like he had started to win, not just the case, but the hearts and minds of the people. The courtroom was packed once again. The buzz in the air was thick with anticipation, the cameras flashing, and the murmurs of the crowd only adding to the tension that had been building for weeks. This was it, the final chapter in a saga that had captured the world's attention. Elon Musk stood tall at the defense table, his expression resolute, his gaze unwavering. He had already made his mark. But now, it was time to see whether all his efforts, his words, his sacrifices, would pay off. The judge, who had been steely and distant throughout the hearings, looked a little more human today. The pressures of the case, the media circus surrounding it, and the sheer weight of the issues Musk had brought to light had taken their toll. As she entered the courtroom, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. It was almost as if the case had transcended the legal realm and entered the realm of history. The question wasn't just about whether Musk would pay the fine, but whether the world would ever look at personal freedom the same way again. Elon Musk, the judge began, her voice softer than it had been in previous hearings. You have defied court orders. You have made this about more than just a religious symbol. You've turned this into a fight for freedom of expression, one that has captured the world's attention. But today, we must resolve the matter at hand. Your refusal to comply with the court's decision has led to significant unrest and debate. Yet, it has also sparked important conversations about the boundaries of personal freedom. Musk stood there, calm and unyielding. He had already prepared for this moment. The media had been abuzz, but today, it felt like the world was holding its breath. I appreciate your acknowledgement, Your Honor, Musk said, his voice steady. This case was never just about the cross I wear. It's about the principle of freedom. The principle that each person, regardless of their status, background, or beliefs, has the right to live as they choose without fear of retribution. I didn't challenge the law for the sake of rebellion, I challenged it because we, as a society, must ask ourselves, how much of our individuality are we willing to sacrifice in the name of conformity? The courtroom was silent. Even the judge, who had been firm in her rulings, seemed momentarily struck by Musk's words. For the first time in the proceedings, there was a palpable shift, a recognition that the case had moved beyond its original scope. The judge took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking again. Elon Musk, your actions have stirred controversy. They have divided the public. However, they have also forced us to confront questions that have long been avoided. Can personal freedom coexist with societal rules? Can we have a society where people are free to express themselves without fear of judgment or punishment? This case has not only put you at odds with the law, but it has challenged the very nature of how we view personal liberties in this country. She paused, her gaze lingering on Musk for a moment before addressing the court. In light of the significant public interest, the broader implications of this case, and the role it has played in opening up this conversation, I find it appropriate to issue a ruling that goes beyond the fine or contempt charges. Musk's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't the kind of legal ruling he had expected. He had prepared himself for a decision that could set him back, that could potentially cripple him with fines or charges. But this was different. The judge looked directly at Musk. This court, having considered the unprecedented nature of this case and its broader societal implications, hereby declares that the fine will be waived. Furthermore, the court acknowledges that this case has raised important constitutional questions regarding the scope of personal expression. The matter is hereby dismissed. A stunned silence swept through the courtroom. It was over. The weight of it hadn't fully settled on Musk, but he could feel the stirrings of triumph deep within. The world had been watching, and the message had been heard. As the judge slammed the gavel, Musk's legal team exchanged quick glances, unsure whether to break into applause or simply reflect on the moment. Musk, however, stood motionless, his eyes scanning the courtroom. The ruling wasn't just a personal victory, it was a victory for freedom of expression, for the countless people who had supported him along the way, for those who had stood behind him during the darkest moments of the fight. And perhaps, most importantly, it was a victory for the idea that no matter how powerful or influential you were, you could still challenge the system when it was wrong. The media erupted in cheers and confusion, journalists scrambling to report the latest developments. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed as reporters fought for a soundbite. The world had been waiting for this moment, and now it had arrived. Elon Musk had done the impossible, he had defied the system, he had stood up for what he believed in, and he had won. But the victory wasn't just about the case. As Musk walked out of the courthouse, surrounded by a sea of reporters and cameras, he knew that something much larger had begun. He had started a movement. People who had once been silent now found their voices. Those who had been afraid to stand up for their rights now had a blueprint for action. Musk's fight had illuminated a path for the countless individuals who felt powerless in the face of bureaucracy, who felt confined by the expectations of society. The public reaction was immediate. Support poured in from all corners of the globe. #WearTheCross trended worldwide, not just as a symbol of religious expression, but as a symbol of personal freedom. People from all walks of life began to share their stories of overcoming adversity and standing up for their beliefs, regardless of the consequences. It wasn't just about a piece of jewelry, it was about what that piece represented, the right to choose, to be oneself without fear of judgment. But as the movement grew, Musk found himself at the center of something he hadn't fully anticipated. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, and the world seemed to be at a crossroads. The questions raised by this case were far from resolved. They were only just beginning. The battle for personal freedom had been won in the courtroom, but the larger war, the fight for individual rights in a world of constant surveillance and control, was far from over. As Musk stood before the cameras, reflecting on everything that had transpired, he felt an unexpected weight in his chest. He had won, but the victory was bittersweet. He knew that the fight for freedom was ongoing. The world, in all its complexity, would always present new challenges, new obstacles. But for the first time in his life, he felt a profound sense of hope. The journey was far from over, but he had lit a spark that would burn brightly for those who believed that freedom of expression was a fundamental right, not a privilege. And as the crowds dispersed, as the media buzzed with the latest headlines, Musk walked away with a quiet confidence. The battle for freedom had begun. And he, Elon Musk, was ready to lead it. The dust had barely settled from the courtroom victory when the world began to take notice. News outlets around the globe were broadcasting Musk's unprecedented legal battle and its outcome. Headlines screamed about the dismissal of the fine and the broader implications of the case. But there was something much more profound happening just beneath the surface, an awakening. In the days following the ruling, a wave of commentary surged across social media. Some people hailed Musk as a champion of personal rights, while others criticized him for stirring up controversy. Yet, the most significant shift wasn't in the opinions of those who already knew where they stood. It was in the people who had previously felt powerless, those who had never imagined they could take a stand, much less win. The hashtag #WearTheCross movement spread like wildfire. It wasn't just about Musk wearing a religious symbol. It became a symbol of freedom in its purest form, a symbol that people could wear, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. People from all walks of life started sharing their stories, posting pictures of themselves wearing crosses, flags, tattoos, or any symbol that represented their personal beliefs and values. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about expressing who they were, unapologetically, regardless of what others thought. In towns across the country, individuals who had felt silenced found their voices. Some shared their struggles with discrimination, others with personal identity. Still, others spoke about how they had long since buried parts of themselves for fear of retribution. Now, they felt emboldened, empowered by Musk's defiance in the courtroom. Musk, however, didn't bask in the glory of his newfound status as a hero of personal freedom. Instead, he found himself grappling with the weight of the movement he had unwittingly started. As the media coverage intensified, so did the scrutiny. For every person who rallied behind him, there were others who questioned his motives. Why had he taken on the case in the first place? Was it truly about personal freedom, or was it another ploy to maintain his public persona? One morning, as Musk sat in his office at SpaceX, reading through emails, he received a message from someone he hadn't expected, Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter. The two had met a few times before, during tech summits and informal gatherings, but they had never truly connected. The email read, "Elon. I've been following the developments of your case closely, and I think you're onto something. You've sparked a larger conversation about freedom of expression, but I also think we need to be careful. The tech world has become a battleground for ideas, and it's easy to forget that freedom comes with consequences. What you've done is brave, but it could also mean that you're drawing more attention to yourself than you realize. The tech industry, especially, is built on frameworks of control, algorithms, rules, regulations, and social media policies. I've watched them shape everything we do, but I think it's time for us to challenge these frameworks. You've started something important. Let's talk." Jack D. Musk leaned back in his chair, the words sinking in. Dorsey, with all his knowledge of social media's impact on public opinion, had raised an essential point. Musk had never been one to shy away from challenges, but now the stakes were higher. He was no longer just dealing with corporate and legal pressures. His actions had triggered a ripple effect across industries and ideologies that could ultimately change how people approached personal freedom in the digital age. In the weeks that followed, Musk and Dorsey began collaborating more seriously. The idea that had started as a fight over personal expression had evolved into a conversation about digital rights, privacy, and the role of tech giants in shaping public discourse. Together, they planned a conference, a gathering of leaders in the tech and legal fields, philosophers, civil rights activists, and influencers, designed to address the new age of freedom and the emerging question of who truly controlled the narrative in the digital world. The announcement of the conference sent shockwaves through the industry. People were eager to hear what Musk and Dorsey would have to say. Was this going to be a summit on the future of the internet, or a confrontation over the growing divide between individual freedoms and corporate power? Either way, the stakes had never been higher. As the day of the conference drew near, Musk was faced with an unexpected dilemma. As much as he believed in the cause and the idea of empowering individuals, he knew that the tech world was not a place of easy answers. It wasn't just about a cross, or about personal expression, it was about how the digital age had reshaped the way society viewed freedom itself. What did freedom mean in a world where algorithms tracked every move, where corporations held sway over what ideas were amplified or suppressed? The night before the conference, Musk found himself staring out the window of his office again. He could hear the faint hum of rockets being tested in the distance. SpaceX was preparing for its next big launch. The contrast wasn't lost on him. On one side of his life, he was creating technologies that could change the future of humanity. On the other, he was battling for something much more basic, the right to exist as an individual without fear of losing his identity to a system that sought to control everything. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his wife, Grimes. "You've started something bigger than yourself. I just want you to remember that it's not all black and white. You're not just fighting for your right to wear a cross. You're fighting for people to remember that they have the power to choose, to shape their own destinies. Stay true to that." Musk smiled softly, taking in her words. She was right. This had grown far beyond the confines of the courtroom, beyond the scope of his own life. He wasn't just an individual standing up for a religious symbol, he was standing for something that transcended the individual. He was standing for humanity's right to exist freely in a world that increasingly sought to confine that freedom. The next day, as Musk stepped onto the stage at the conference, the energy in the room was electric. People from all over the world had gathered to hear what he, Dorsey, and the other speakers had to say. The room fell silent as Musk took the microphone. "I never intended to start a revolution," Musk began, his voice steady but impassioned. "But sometimes, when you stand for something bigger than yourself, you realize that the fight is just beginning." He went on to discuss the challenges ahead, the power of technology to either enable or limit personal freedom, and the responsibility that came with the immense power of tech companies to shape the public narrative. The crowd hung on every word, but there was something else in the air. It wasn't just Musk's words that resonated. It was the realization that this wasn't a singular fight. This was a movement, one that would reshape the future of freedom in the digital age. The world had been watching, and not everyone was pleased with Musk's victory. While many cheered for his defiance in the courtroom, there were those who saw his actions as a threat to the established order. The ripples from his case weren't all positive, especially in the corridors of power, where politicians and corporate executives saw the growing movement as something to control or, at worst, crush. Musk had known that taking a stand for personal freedom would have consequences. He had prepared for the scrutiny, for the questioning of his motives, and for the inevitable backlash. What he hadn't anticipated was the extent to which certain powerful entities would rally against him. The first signs of trouble appeared a week after the conference announcement. News outlets that had initially praised Musk's bravery began to backpedal. The headlines shifted from admiring the CEO's courage to questioning his integrity. Elon Musk, hero or self-serving provocateur, one prominent news outlet declared. Another, with a pointed editorial, questioned whether Musk's actions were a calculated PR move rather than a genuine stance for personal freedom. At first, Musk brushed it off, thinking that it was just another round of media spin. But then, the campaign against him escalated. A series of coordinated op-eds started popping up in major publications, all framing the situation in the same way. Musk's challenge to the court wasn't just about freedom, it was about his disregard for rules, a dangerous precedent for those who were already in positions of power. Imagine a world where the rich and powerful can flout the law with impunity, one editorial argued. Musk may have won in court, but what about the common man? What about those who don't have the luxury of challenging authority without consequences? These critiques, however, were just the beginning. The backlash quickly moved beyond words into action. The first concrete sign of this came when the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, launched an investigation into Musk's role in the case. The government agency, which had been a thorn in Musk's side for years, seemed to seize upon the moment to scrutinize his every move. Elon Musk is a well-known figure, an SEC spokesperson said during a press conference. He has been involved in high-profile legal matters before. We are looking into whether his actions in this case violated any securities laws, especially considering the potential effect his case has had on public opinion and stock prices. Musk had faced the SEC before, and he wasn't worried about their threats. He knew that the agency's scrutiny was often more about making an example of those who defied the establishment. But this was different. This wasn't just about a regulatory agency making its usual moves. This was a full-on campaign against him, and it was starting to feel personal. The news broke just as Musk was preparing for his next big move, a series of meetings with Dorsey and a group of technology and civil rights leaders. These meetings were to lay the groundwork for a new initiative, one that would challenge the very framework of censorship, control, and surveillance in the digital age. The group, which included some of the most influential thinkers and activists in tech, was about to launch a project that aimed to reclaim digital freedoms for the masses. The backlash had a dual effect. On one hand, it strengthened Musk's resolve, driving him to press harder for his vision of freedom. On the other, it forced him to reconsider his alliances and carefully evaluate the people around him. The SEC's investigation and the media attacks made it clear that he could not fight this battle alone. This is where an unexpected ally came into the picture. During one of the early meetings with Dorsey, Musk was introduced to Rebecca Hunter, a prominent civil rights attorney known for her work on First Amendment cases. She had followed Musk's legal battle closely and was impressed with how he had stood up against the system. Hunter had spent much of her career fighting for the rights of marginalized communities, but her experience in the tech space made her uniquely qualified to help Musk navigate the growing conflict. "People are scared, Elon," Rebecca said as they sat in a conference room at Twitter headquarters, papers scattered across the table. "You've shaken the system. You've given them a reason to unite against you. And now, you need to prepare for the next phase. This isn't just about one case anymore. This is about pushing back against a system that's built to keep people in check." Musk had heard the concerns, but he was determined not to back down. His fight for freedom wasn't just for himself, it was for everyone who felt the weight of a system that tried to silence them. "I know what I'm up against," Musk said, looking at Hunter. "But I can't back down now. If we do, it'll be a victory for those who want to control everything. People need to know they have a voice, that they can stand up without fear of retaliation." Hunter nodded, a small but determined smile forming on her face. "That's why I'm with you. I've spent too much of my life seeing people get trampled by systems they didn't understand. If we're going to change things, we have to be smarter. We need to outthink them." Musk could see that Rebecca was someone who understood the complexities of this fight. It wasn't just about speaking out, it was about strategizing, mobilizing, and creating a movement that could withstand the inevitable pushback. The next several weeks were a blur. Musk, Dorsey, Hunter, and the rest of their team worked tirelessly behind the scenes to organize a series of public forums, media campaigns, and advocacy initiatives aimed at bringing more people into the fold. At the same time, Musk and his legal team fought back against the SEC's investigation, calling it politically motivated and an infringement on his rights. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk's vision never wavered. His confidence grew as more and more people joined the cause. The world was finally starting to understand the true scope of what he was fighting for. And while the opposition mounted, so too did the support. But just as things seemed to be gaining momentum, an unexpected twist would shake the foundation of everything Musk had worked so hard to build. The tension in the air was palpable. Musk had faced scrutiny before, but this felt different. The growing backlash from the media, tech giants, and even the government was no longer just noise in the background, it was becoming a coordinated, full-scale assault. His name was trending on every platform, but not in the way he had hoped. Where once his ventures in space exploration and electric cars were the talk of the town, now his legal battle was the dominant topic of discussion. At the heart of the matter was the cross. It wasn't about religion, or even about what it symbolized. It was about defiance. Musk had shown that even a billionaire with immense power could be challenged, and this realization frightened the establishment. They feared that if Musk's actions became a blueprint, others would follow suit, creating an uprising of individuals claiming their rights in ways that could disrupt industries, economies, and governments. As the days passed, Musk's legal team worked tirelessly to fend off the mounting challenges, but it was clear that simply defending himself wasn't enough. Something bigger was needed, something that would shift the narrative away from him being a mere target and place him firmly at the center of a movement for individual freedom. It was in this climate of uncertainty that Rebecca Hunter, his newly acquired civil rights attorney, suggested a bold idea: take the fight directly to the people. "We've been on the defensive long enough, Elon," Rebecca said one evening as they sat in the office of a quiet cafe, away from the prying eyes of the media. "The narrative is shifting against you. The media, the government, they're framing this as you challenging authority for personal gain. What if we flip the script? Instead of responding to them, what if we shift the focus entirely to the bigger issue, the erosion of personal freedoms?" Musk sat back in his chair, contemplating her words. It was a shift in perspective that was hard to ignore. Rebecca wasn't suggesting a reactive move. She was urging him to stop playing defense and, instead, go on the offense, something Musk had mastered in his business career, but had yet to do in this fight for personal freedom. "You want to turn this into a crusade for everyone, not just me," Musk said, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Exactly," Rebecca replied. "We need to make this a battle for the future of all individuals. For freedom. For the ability to live life without being constantly watched, monitored, or censored. It's not just about one cross. It's about the fact that so many people are being silenced by systems they don't even understand. This is bigger than you. This is bigger than any one person." Musk was quiet for a moment. He could feel the weight of the decision, and he knew that this would be the turning point. If they took this route, there would be no turning back. They would be taking on a much bigger fight, one that could either change the world or destroy everything he had built. "I'm in," Musk said, his voice firm. "Let's do it. Let's make this a movement." The strategy was simple, yet ambitious. They would use the growing wave of support for Musk's case to launch a global campaign advocating for the protection of personal freedoms in the digital age. They would partner with influencers, activists, and thought leaders in tech, law, and civil rights to create a massive, coordinated push to raise awareness. Musk's legal battle would serve as the catalyst, but the focus would be on the larger issue of overreach in the digital era. The team set to work immediately, drafting speeches, writing articles, and organizing interviews with journalists who had followed Musk's case. But they also reached out to experts in the field of digital rights, people like Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web, who had long warned of the dangers of centralization and surveillance in the online world. Musk knew that they would need the voices of those who understood the technology behind the systems they were fighting to control. By the end of the week, the movement had a name: the Freedom for All Initiative. It was simple, direct, and powerful. The goal was to rally support from everyday people who felt as though they were being slowly suffocated by the very technologies they used every day. Musk and his team had crafted a vision that was about reclaiming personal agency in a world increasingly dominated by corporations and governments. The first public event would be a televised speech by Musk himself. He had always been comfortable on stage, but this was different. This wasn't about launching a new product or talking about the future of space travel. This was about something much more personal, his vision for the future of personal freedom and his belief that society's dependence on digital systems shouldn't come at the cost of individual rights. The night before the speech, Musk found himself once again in his private office, staring out the window. The stars above were a familiar sight, but tonight, they felt different. He wasn't just looking at them as a reminder of his company's mission to get to Mars. Tonight, they reminded him of the vastness of the challenge ahead. He was staring down something much larger than any business venture he had ever undertaken. This wasn't just about conquering new frontiers, it was about preserving humanity's right to exist freely. Rebecca's words echoed in his mind. It's not just about one cross. It's about the future of freedom. Musk knew that the battle he was about to wage could define the future of humanity in the digital age. If he succeeded, it wouldn't just be a personal victory, it would be a victory for every individual who felt like their voice had been lost in the noise of a hyper-connected, hyper-regulated world. The next day, the speech was broadcast live across multiple platforms. The audience, both online and in the room, watched in rapt attention as Musk walked to the podium, wearing a simple white shirt and, of course, his cross. He stood tall, his gaze unwavering. I stand before you today, not as a billionaire, but as a man who believes in the future of individual freedom, Musk began, his voice strong but measured. The fight that started in a courtroom is now a global conversation. A conversation about whether we, the people, still have control over our own lives in a world that is rapidly being shaped by powerful forces beyond our control. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Then, he continued. I believe that the digital age is one of the most transformative periods in human history. But with that transformation comes a responsibility, to ensure that technology serves us, not the other way around. We cannot afford to lose our freedom simply because it's convenient to centralize power. We cannot allow our voices to be drowned out by algorithms or governments that do not have our best interests at heart. Musk's words resonated with millions of people across the globe. The world was watching, and they were listening. As the speech ended, the world's reaction was swift. Supporters flooded social media with messages of encouragement, using the hashtag #FreedomForAll. The message had landed. But as Musk stepped down from the stage, he knew that the real battle had just begun. This was more than a legal fight, more than a tech debate, it was a global struggle for the soul of freedom in the digital era. Musk's speech was only the beginning. What followed was an unexpected surge of support that turned his bold idea into a worldwide movement. The Freedom for All initiative wasn't just a rallying cry for personal freedom in the digital age, it became the face of a larger ideological shift. People from all walks of life, across all continents, began to stand up and say they had had enough of being controlled, watched, and manipulated by systems that didn't care about their rights. The hashtag #FreedomForAll trended for days after Musk's speech. It wasn't just the tech world that rallied to the cause, but ordinary citizens who were beginning to realize that their lives were being shaped in ways they never fully understood. The message was clear, technology could be a tool for empowerment, but when left unchecked, it had the power to enslave. For Musk, the response was overwhelming. He had expected some level of support, but nothing to the scale that unfolded. Social media platforms, once seen as the enemy in his fight for freedom, became vital tools for spreading his message. Influencers, activists, and even some celebrities began posting messages of solidarity, amplifying the movement's reach. One of the most vocal supporters was Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Twitter, whose support had been pivotal in Musk's legal defense. Dorsey, who had already voiced concerns about the centralization of power in tech, became a leading figure in the movement. His credibility and history in the tech world gave the initiative legitimacy, helping bridge the gap between everyday people and the tech elite. But it wasn't just individuals who were taking note. As the movement grew, so did the pressure on governments, corporations, and other influential figures. Politicians from around the world began commenting on the issue, many of them echoing Musk's concern about the growing control of digital platforms and surveillance technologies. "We cannot allow our citizens to be subjugated by a few tech companies who hold all the cards," said Senator Rachel Adams, a vocal critic of corporate control in the digital age. "We must act now to ensure that the people retain their rights and freedoms in the age of technology." Musk, who had never shied away from controversy, was quick to engage with these figures. He knew that in order to change the system, he would need to get politicians on his side, especially those with the power to legislate against overreach in the tech space. But while the movement surged, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The same systems Musk had criticized began to fight back in more direct ways. The tech giants, once heralded as champions of innovation, now faced accusations of exploiting the very freedoms Musk was championing. They, too, had become part of the very system that Musk was pushing against. Facebook, now Meta, was one of the first to react. CEO Mark Zuckerberg released a statement declaring that while the company supported individual freedom, it was essential for platforms to maintain control over the content shared to prevent harmful misinformation from spreading. "We support free expression, but with responsibility," Zuckerberg said in an interview. "The balance between freedom and safety must be maintained. Without this balance, we risk allowing harmful content to flourish unchecked. This is not a fight against freedom, it's about protecting society." For Musk, the message was clear: Zuckerberg was using safety and security as an excuse to tighten the control that tech giants held over their platforms. Musk saw it as another example of corporate overreach, and he wasn't going to let it slide. "You can't claim to support freedom and then silence voices you don't agree with," Musk fired back in a tweet. "If we're going to have real freedom, we need to allow people to speak their minds, even when it's uncomfortable." The battle between Musk and the tech giants escalated in the weeks that followed. Musk's team continued to push the Freedom for All initiative forward with new momentum, but the digital landscape was now divided. Supporters of Musk's cause rallied behind his every word, while critics of his movement, many of whom held key positions in powerful tech companies, began to form alliances with government regulators to counteract his influence. The next stage in Musk's strategy was to launch a public debate, a global discussion that would engage not only tech leaders but also intellectuals, activists, and everyday people. The goal was simple: to force the world to confront the issue of freedom and digital rights head-on. The debate would take place in multiple cities around the world, each one focusing on the balance between technology, power, and individual rights. Musk knew that this debate could be the pivotal moment that decided the future of the movement. The first debate was scheduled to take place in New York City. It would feature prominent figures from both sides of the issue, tech giants like Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai from Google, as well as Musk and his allies, including Dorsey and Hunter. The event was being broadcast globally, and it promised to be a spectacle like no other, a clash of ideologies that could shape the future of the digital world. As the date of the debate drew closer, tensions continued to mount. The media, ever hungry for drama, began to hype up the event as the showdown of the century, Musk versus the tech elite. Would Musk be able to outwit his opponents with his legal genius once again, or would the forces against him prevail and crush the movement in its infancy? Musk, ever confident, prepared for the debate with an intensity that matched the stakes. His team worked tirelessly to anticipate every possible argument his opponents might make. But even as he prepared for the public spectacle, Musk knew that this debate would not just be about winning an argument, it would be about winning the hearts and minds of people around the world. The future of personal freedom in the digital age was at stake. "I've never been afraid of a fight," Musk said to his team in the days leading up to the debate. "But this fight is different. It's not just about us anymore. It's about everyone." With the global spotlight on them, the movement had grown beyond Musk's wildest expectations. What began as a legal defense had transformed into a global crusade for digital freedom. Now, all eyes were on New York, where the future of individual rights in the digital age would be decided. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The movement is growing, and the stakes have never been higher. What are your thoughts on the upcoming debate? Will Musk be able to shift the narrative, or will the tech giants regain control? New York City, the heart of America's political, financial, and media landscape, was the perfect setting for the most anticipated debate of the century. As the world's most influential tech moguls gathered in one of the grandest halls in Manhattan, the atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. This wasn't just another corporate boardroom battle, it was a global spectacle. The digital age had reached a critical juncture, and on this stage, the fight for the future of personal freedoms would unfold. Musk, dressed in a simple black suit and his signature cross resting under his collar, sat in a corner backstage, flanked by his closest advisors. His mind raced with thoughts of the approaching confrontation. This was more than a debate, it was the culmination of everything he had worked for in this fight. The movement had grown beyond a legal case or a corporate dispute. It was now a question of who would control the future of the digital world, the people or the corporate giants who had come to dominate it. Rebecca Hunter, his lead attorney and ally, paced nervously beside him. "You're going to crush them," she said, trying to offer words of comfort. But she knew the stakes. This wasn't about winning an argument, it was about changing the future of society. Musk gave her a tight smile. "We don't need to crush them. We just need to make sure the world understands that this isn't just about me, it's about all of us." The debate was set to take place in front of a live audience, with cameras broadcasting the event across the globe. It would feature Musk, Jack Dorsey, Rebecca Hunter, and other digital freedom advocates on one side, with Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, and other corporate tech leaders on the other. The topic was simple, yet profoundly complex: freedom and privacy in the digital age, can we have both? As the debate began, the room fell silent. The moderator, an experienced political analyst, opened the event with a powerful statement. "Tonight, we have a question that has divided experts, politicians, and business leaders: can we achieve a balance between innovation, personal freedom, and security in the digital age? On one side, we have Elon Musk, a leader who has revolutionized industries and is now challenging the status quo. On the other side, we have leaders of some of the most influential tech companies in the world, companies that argue for a controlled, regulated approach to ensure safety in the ever-evolving digital landscape. Let the debate begin." Musk stood up as the crowd erupted into applause, his calm demeanor only enhancing his aura of confidence. He walked to the podium, his posture straight and resolute. He didn't need flashy words or grand gestures, his presence alone conveyed his conviction. "I don't believe we have to choose between innovation and personal freedom," Musk began, his voice steady but intense. "The reality is that we've already chosen, we've chosen convenience over freedom. We've allowed corporations to control the digital systems that govern our lives, and now they're using those systems to control what we see, what we hear, and even what we believe." The room went still. Musk's words had struck a nerve, but the tech giants weren't going to back down so easily. Mark Zuckerberg, wearing a sharp suit and looking every bit the part of a Silicon Valley mogul, was the first to respond. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Zuckerberg began, his tone measured but firm. "Technology, at its core, has brought the world closer together. Facebook, now Meta, connects billions of people across the globe. We've introduced innovations that help people communicate, collaborate, and share ideas. But with that power comes responsibility. We have to protect individuals from misinformation, hate speech, and exploitation. Freedom doesn't mean freedom without consequences. We need regulation." Musk didn't flinch. "The problem isn't regulation," he countered. "The problem is that regulation has been hijacked by powerful corporations that use it as a way to stifle competition and control the narrative. It's not about protecting people, it's about controlling them." The crowd murmured, clearly divided. Musk's supporters were cheering him on, but Zuckerberg's calm and collected argument was not easily dismissed. Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, joined the conversation. Elon, with all due respect, the landscape has changed, Pichai said. The digital world isn't just about the tech we create, it's about how it's used. We live in a time where cyber attacks, misinformation, and data breaches are becoming increasingly common. If we don't regulate the flow of information and protect the data of billions of people, we risk chaos. Musk turned toward Pichai, his eyes narrowing slightly. What you're talking about is control, Sundar, not protection. You're using fear to justify the tightening of a system that benefits those at the top. I'm not arguing for a free-for-all where anything goes, but I do believe we need a system where individuals have the right to choose how they interact with technology. People should not be subjected to algorithms that dictate their thoughts and behaviors. The debate raged on for hours, each side making their case. Musk's arguments, rooted in the ideals of personal liberty and digital autonomy, were met with strong resistance from the corporate leaders who argued for the necessity of regulation to protect against misuse. But as the debate reached its climax, Musk made his most compelling argument yet. The question isn't whether we can have freedom and privacy, Musk said, his voice cutting through the room. The real question is whether we're willing to fight for it. Freedom isn't something that's just handed to us. It's something we have to fight for every day. If we let these tech giants control our lives, if we allow our data to be mined and our voices to be suppressed, we'll lose everything we've built. We'll become slaves to the system. A hushed silence fell over the room. Musk's words had the weight of a prophecy, and the audience was hanging on every syllable. He had framed the debate in a way that was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a corporate dispute, this was a battle for the soul of the digital world. Zuckerberg, sensing the shift, tried to regain control. Elon, I agree with you that we need to protect individual freedoms. But there's a difference between freedom and anarchy. We can't have a system where anyone can spread lies or incite violence without consequence. Musk didn't back down. We can regulate without controlling. We can protect without silencing. The debate ended with no clear winner. Both sides had made compelling points. But as the audience filed out of the venue, the air was thick with the feeling that something had shifted. Musk had won the ideological battle. His vision for digital freedom, though radical to some, had struck a chord with millions. Backstage, as the lights dimmed, Rebecca Hunter stood beside Musk, her face filled with pride. "You did it," she said quietly. "You made them listen." Musk smiled. "This is just the beginning. We've started a conversation, and now it's up to the people to decide where we go from here." The stage was set for a global shift. The Freedom for All initiative was no longer just a movement, it was a force to be reckoned with. The debate had sparked the flames of change, and now, there was no turning back. The aftermath of the Great Debate was nothing short of electric. The digital world buzzed with opinions, discussions, and analyses from every corner of the globe. Mainstream media outlets were flooded with coverage, from CNN to Fox News, from the New York Times to The Guardian. But it wasn't just the traditional press that was reacting. Social media platforms exploded with hashtags, memes, and viral clips from the debate. Musk's words echoed across Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hashtag Freedom for All had now become synonymous with digital rights, and the movement that had started in the courtroom had officially gone global. But as public opinion shifted in Musk's favor, there were unforeseen consequences. In the days following the debate, several polls showed a surge of support for Musk's views. According to a survey conducted by Pew Research, nearly 60% of respondents across the U.S. agreed that the government should intervene to break up large tech companies and regulate their practices. Another poll revealed that 65% of people felt that social media platforms were stifling free expression and using algorithms to manipulate what people saw, which Musk had argued throughout the debate. Musk's team was ecstatic about the results, but they knew that the battle was far from over. With this newfound momentum, the Freedom for All initiative now had a chance to push for real legislative change. However, Musk was keenly aware that the powers he was challenging, corporations and governments, would not go down without a fight. Jack Dorsey, a longtime ally of Musk's and the co-founder of Twitter, sent a message shortly after the debate. "We've started something big, Elon," Jack wrote. "But now we need to take it to the streets, literally. It's time for real-world activism." Musk had always admired Dorsey's vision and his early commitment to free speech. Now, with the global spotlight on them, it seemed like the perfect time to mobilize. The plan was simple but ambitious: freedom for all rallies in major cities around the world. The idea was to bring the fight for digital freedom out of the digital realm and into the streets, where ordinary people could show their support for the cause. The first rally was held in Los Angeles, where thousands of people, young and old, tech-savvy and not, gathered in front of City Hall, holding up signs that read, "Protect our data," and "Freedom of expression for all." It was a peaceful event, but the energy was palpable. As Musk's message spread, people began to organize their own rallies in other cities. New York, London, Berlin, and even Tokyo joined the movement. What started as a courtroom battle had evolved into a global push for change. Musk, still as controversial as ever, was seen as the face of the movement. He appeared at several rallies, but always with a calm demeanor. The more he spoke about the need for a free and open internet, the more people seemed to resonate with his message. He wasn't just some tech billionaire pushing an agenda, he was a voice for the people, a leader who was challenging a system that had grown too powerful. However, not everyone was thrilled with Musk's growing influence. As the rallies gained steam, major tech companies began to push back harder, using their power and resources to counter the movement. Zuckerberg and Pichai, along with other industry leaders, privately met with government officials to discuss how to manage the growing opposition. At a closed-door meeting in Washington, D.C., a group of powerful tech executives convened with high-ranking politicians to strategize a response to Musk's growing influence. The conversation was tense, with several executives voicing concerns about the long-term impact of Musk's crusade for digital freedom. "We can't let this go on unchecked," said a well-known lobbyist for Silicon Valley. "Musk is tapping into something dangerous. If we don't take action now, we'll lose control over the narrative." Pichai, who had been relatively quiet in the aftermath of the debate, spoke up. "Elon is framing this as a battle between freedom and oppression, but we all know that the digital world is much more complex. The risks of allowing complete freedom in the digital space are enormous. We could face a situation where harmful content, fake news, and cyber attacks become rampant." Zuckerberg nodded. "We need to counter this narrative, but we need to do it carefully. If we come off as too heavy-handed, it will only fuel Musk's argument. We need to show that we're on the side of safety, not censorship." The tech giants, aware of the growing public sentiment against them, began to ramp up their efforts to reframe the debate. They launched new ad campaigns touting their commitment to privacy and freedom of expression while simultaneously pushing for greater regulation and control over digital platforms. It was a delicate balancing act, and one that they knew could tip either way depending on how the public perceived their actions. Musk, ever the strategist, knew that this was coming. He had prepared for this moment by solidifying his alliances and using his platform to directly address the growing pressure. He tweeted late one evening, his message as direct as it was pointed. "When powerful entities conspire to control information, they are no longer serving society, they are controlling it. The future of our freedom depends on whether we have the courage to fight for it. If we don't, we risk becoming digital slaves. #FreedomForAll." The tweet went viral within minutes, sparking a new wave of support from people around the world. However, it also provoked an immediate backlash from his critics. Some accused him of stoking division, while others claimed that Musk's rhetoric was dangerously naive. Musk, undeterred by the backlash, continued his campaign, organizing more rallies and public appearances. He knew that the more he put himself in the public eye, the more people would see his commitment to the cause. He wasn't just advocating for personal freedom, he was fighting for the very soul of the internet. As public opinion shifted in Musk's favor, the tech giants realized that they needed to do more than just counter his arguments, they needed to undermine his credibility. Over the next few weeks, stories began to surface in the media questioning Musk's motives. Some claimed that his push for digital freedom was just a ploy to increase his own power and influence. Others questioned his sincerity, suggesting that his true intentions were less about freedom and more about protecting his businesses and interests. But Musk was ready. He knew that the only way to fight back against these attacks was with transparency and action. He launched a new initiative, one that would go beyond words and promises. The Freedom for All Foundation was established to fund research and development for technologies that would empower individuals to take control of their own digital lives. The foundation's mission was simple: to create tools that would allow people to reclaim their data, control their privacy, and ensure their right to free expression in the digital age. The foundation's launch was a game-changer. It solidified Musk's commitment to the movement and demonstrated that he wasn't just talking about change, he was actively working to create it. The tech giants, seeing the growing public support for Musk's cause, began to recalibrate their strategies, realizing that this was no longer just a debate about freedom. This was a fight for the future of the digital world, and they could no longer afford to ignore it. As the weeks passed, it became increasingly clear that the Freedom for All initiative was more than just a digital revolution, it was a cultural movement. From the streets to the boardrooms, from social media to the halls of government, the cause was spreading like wildfire. But with every rise, there's always a counterforce. And the powerful tech giants were now beginning to show their true hand. Elon Musk had become more than just a figurehead, he had become the face of a new era in the battle for personal freedom and privacy. His Freedom for All Foundation had gained substantial traction, securing funding and support from various high-profile figures and organizations. More importantly, it was beginning to make a real impact. New privacy-focused apps, data protection tools, and decentralized technologies were now in development under the foundation's umbrella. It was no longer just talk, it was action. But as Musk's movement gained steam, the response from the tech industry's elite became more coordinated, more aggressive. The first sign of this counterattack came when Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai held a joint press conference in Silicon Valley, where they revealed a new initiative they claimed would revolutionize the digital landscape. The initiative, titled SafeNet, promised to introduce more rigorous privacy protections, enhanced security measures, and greater transparency in how personal data was handled by their platforms. "We hear the concerns of the public," Zuckerberg began, his face stern and composed. "The internet must be a safe place, where freedom and security coexist. SafeNet is our commitment to ensuring that privacy isn't just a buzzword, it's a right. This is our answer to the growing concerns over misuse of personal data." Pichai added, "The digital world is evolving, and with it, the need for responsible management. SafeNet isn't just a response to a debate, it's a solution that balances individual freedoms with the collective safety of our global community." Their message was clear: they were stepping up to the challenge, not just by defending their companies, but by presenting themselves as the guardians of the very freedoms that Musk had been championing. It was a direct challenge to Musk's platform and his Freedom for All initiative. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Supporters of Musk's cause saw it for what it was, an attempt to steal the narrative and weaken the push for digital freedom. Critics, however, praised the tech giants for addressing privacy issues head-on and for taking responsibility for the digital age's growing complexities. The media was divided, with some lauding Zuckerberg and Pichai's efforts, while others accused them of co-opting the freedom narrative for their own gain. Musk's response came swiftly. On his Twitter account, he posted a single sentence that encapsulated his position. "SafeNet is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's control disguised as protection. The people deserve true freedom, not more corporate surveillance." He followed this with a statement on his own platform, X.com. "SafeNet isn't about safety, it's about maintaining the status quo. We're not going to sit back while these giants try to control the narrative and use the very problems they created to grow their influence. The people have had enough. #Freedom for All." The lines were now clearly drawn. Musk knew that it wasn't enough to just expose the hypocrisy of the tech giants. He needed to escalate the movement, to make it undeniable. So, he did what he does best, he turned to technology. In a daring move, Musk announced that the Freedom for All Foundation was launching its own decentralized platform, a new social media network that would be built around the principles of privacy, autonomy, and free expression. This new platform, called LibertyNet, would be free from the influence of corporate giants, powered by blockchain technology, and governed by the principles of open-source software. It was Musk's boldest move yet, one that would directly challenge the grip that Facebook, Google, and others had on digital communication. "This is about giving the power back to the people," Musk declared at the press conference. "We need a digital world where individuals control their data and their voices are heard without the interference of corporate giants. LibertyNet will be the platform where people come together, not to be watched, but to be free." The reaction to LibertyNet was immediate and intense. Tech enthusiasts and privacy advocates were elated. They flooded social media with excitement, praising Musk for taking the fight to the heart of Silicon Valley. Developers, inspired by Musk's vision, began working tirelessly on creating the platform's infrastructure. But the tech giants were not going to let Musk's move go unchallenged. Within days, both Facebook and Google issued statements condemning the new platform, calling it anarchical and unregulated. They argued that a decentralized platform would be prone to exploitation, misinformation, and cyber attacks. They framed Musk's platform as a dangerous experiment that could jeopardize the security of users worldwide. Zuckerberg, in particular, ramped up his efforts, releasing an open letter in which he warned of the dangers of digital lawlessness. "The reality is that a platform built without accountability can easily become a breeding ground for harmful content," Zuckerberg wrote. "We have a responsibility to ensure that technology serves society, not the other way around. LibertyNet may sound idealistic, but it's a fantasy that would lead to chaos. We cannot risk our collective safety for the sake of an unrealistic vision of freedom." Musk responded in typical fashion, head-on and unflinching. He tweeted, "When you've got billions of dollars on the line, it's easy to talk about responsibility. The question is, whose responsibility is it? We're not going to let the tech oligarchs dictate what is safe for us. We need real freedom. #LibertyNet #Freedom for all." Behind the scenes, Musk's allies were already preparing for a counteroffensive. Jack Dorsey, who had long shared Musk's vision of a decentralized future, reached out to his old friend. The two began strategizing on how to accelerate the development of LibertyNet and ensure that it would stand up to the inevitable pushback from the tech giants. "We need to move fast," Dorsey told Musk. "If we can get enough developers on board and show that this platform is both secure and free from corporate control, we'll have a real shot at disrupting the system." Musk nodded. "It's time to stop talking about it. We're building the future, now." As development on LibertyNet ramped up, Musk took to the airwaves, making a series of high-profile interviews where he passionately defended the platform. He argued that the future of the internet wasn't about control, but about empowerment. He promised that LibertyNet would give users not just privacy, but control over their digital identities, free from the manipulative algorithms of tech giants. In the coming months, the battle between Musk and the tech giants would only grow more intense. What started as a courtroom showdown had now exploded into an all-out war for the soul of the digital world. The world was watching closely, and as the momentum shifted, it became clear that one thing was undeniable: Musk was no longer just a disruptor. He was a leader of a revolution. The rise of LibertyNet was more than just a technical breakthrough, it became a symbol of a larger philosophical battle. At the heart of this battle was a question that everyone seemed to be asking: what is the future of digital freedom? Elon Musk's bold move to build a decentralized social media platform had forced the tech giants to reckon with their role in shaping the digital world. And as the public debate intensified, the question of whether people should have the power to control their own data became central to the global conversation. Musk's challenge to the Silicon Valley status quo wasn't limited to just a technological shift, it was a fundamental confrontation over values. On one side, there was Musk, fighting for the ideals of personal freedom, privacy, and the decentralization of power. On the other, there were the tech giants, like Mark Zuckerberg and Sundar Pichai, who claimed they were working for the greater good of society, promising greater security and responsible management of the digital ecosystem. The international stage was set for a debate unlike any the world had ever seen, and it wouldn't take long for that debate to spill over into the highest echelons of power. At the United Nations, a high-level digital security conference was scheduled to address the growing concerns over privacy, censorship, and the role of tech giants in society. The timing could not have been more perfect. Musk had already made waves with his LibertyNet platform, and the debate over digital freedom had become a hot-button issue worldwide. In attendance were global leaders, tech experts, legal scholars, and representatives from various civil liberties organizations. The conference was designed to explore the future of the Internet and how international laws should evolve to meet the challenges of the digital age. Musk was invited to speak, and his presence was as impactful as ever. Standing at the podium, dressed casually in his signature black jacket, he exuded confidence. His words were direct and uncompromising. "We're facing an existential crisis," Musk began, his voice echoing through the auditorium. The Internet was supposed to be a space for free expression, for innovation, and for the exchange of ideas. But what we have today is a system where a few corporations control the flow of information. They decide what you see, they decide what you hear, and they decide what you know. This is not freedom. This is control. He paused for a moment, letting his words settle. We have an opportunity to fix this. LibertyNet is just the beginning. But we need global cooperation. We need governments and people to take a stand for real freedom. The room fell silent. Musk's words, delivered with the same intensity that had captured the attention of millions around the world, resonated deeply with those who believed in digital rights. But not everyone was convinced. Representing the opposing view, a delegation from the European Union, led by a tech policy expert named Helena de Vries, stood up to challenge Musk's vision. Her tone was measured but firm. "Elon, while your vision of a decentralized internet sounds appealing, it's important to remember that the digital world is not a utopia. Without proper regulation, without safeguards in place, we could open the floodgates for dangerous content, cybercrime, and the exploitation of vulnerable users. The reality is that we need a system that balances freedom with responsibility." Her words sparked a wave of applause from the European delegation and others who viewed regulation as necessary for the safety of citizens in the digital realm. But Musk was ready. The people who control the current systems, like Facebook and Google, have shown us time and time again that they are not interested in creating a fair, open internet. They've prioritized profit over people, and their safeguards are nothing more than mechanisms to control what we see and think. We can do better. We must do better. The tension in the room was palpable. It wasn't just Musk versus the tech giants anymore, it was a battle between two competing visions of the future. Meanwhile, in the United States, the legal pushback against LibertyNet was gaining momentum. The tech giants, along with influential lobbyists, had already begun working behind the scenes to create a framework that would legally challenge Musk's platform. As expected, the core argument from the opposition was that a decentralized platform like LibertyNet lacked accountability, which could open the door to the spread of harmful content and misinformation. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission, FCC, held a series of hearings on the issue, with Musk testifying before Congress to defend his vision. His testimony was captivating and full of the same conviction that had won him so many supporters. Technology should empower people, not control them, Musk testified, sitting before a panel of skeptical lawmakers. LibertyNet is about giving the people the tools to control their own data. If we allow corporations to continue monopolizing the digital world, we will lose our freedom to choose, to speak, and to think for ourselves. The response from the lawmakers was divided. While some applauded Musk for his vision and his commitment to privacy, others were concerned about the potential chaos that could arise from a completely unregulated platform. Senator Dianne Walters, a staunch advocate for tech regulation, was one of the most vocal critics. "Elon, we can't afford to create an internet that is ungoverned. We need rules. We need oversight. You can't just launch a platform and hope for the best. The consequences could be catastrophic. But Musk wasn't deterred. He knew that this was just another hurdle in a long battle. As he left the hearing, he posted a tweet that summed up his stance: "The fight for freedom isn't easy, but it's worth it. We're not backing down. #LibertyNet #Freedom for All." While the debate raged on in the halls of government and at international conferences, the public's response to LibertyNet was unequivocal. The platform began to grow rapidly, with millions of users joining within weeks of its official launch. It wasn't just tech enthusiasts who were flocking to LibertyNet, it was everyday people who felt stifled by the growing power of corporate-controlled platforms. Young people, who were often the first to embrace new technologies, were at the forefront of this movement. They saw LibertyNet not just as a platform, but as a symbol of empowerment. For many, it was a chance to escape the algorithms and censorship that had come to define the social media experience. "I joined LibertyNet because I want to be in control of my own data," said Zoe, a 24-year-old college student. "I don't want companies deciding what I see or who I can talk to. It's my right to decide how I interact with the world." The hashtag #MyDataMyFreedom trended globally as users shared their stories of why they chose to join the platform. Many expressed their frustration with mainstream platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where they felt their voices were being suppressed or manipulated by algorithms designed to maximize engagement. But there were critics, too. Some questioned whether a completely unregulated platform would become a haven for hate speech, misinformation, and criminal activity. Governments and tech companies were quick to point out that the absence of moderation could lead to dangerous consequences. Despite the divided opinions, one thing was clear: LibertyNet was not just a new platform, it was the battleground for the future of digital freedom. And the fight was far from over. The digital world had become a battlefield, and no one could predict which side would emerge victorious. The clash between Elon Musk's LibertyNet and the tech giants had reached a fever pitch, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. What started as a battle for privacy had evolved into a global struggle for control over the future of the Internet. Would freedom triumph, or would corporate regulation snuff out the light of innovation? As the months wore on, the situation became even more tense. Musk's platform, LibertyNet, was expanding rapidly, attracting millions of new users every week. On the surface, it seemed like the perfect antidote to the world of corporate-controlled social media. No algorithms to manipulate what users saw, no surveillance on their every move, no corporate interests deciding what speech was allowed. It was a return to the very ideals the Internet had been founded upon: freedom and openness. Yet the reality was far from simple. For all the promises of privacy and free expression, LibertyNet had its own set of problems. As its user base grew, so too did the challenges that came with it. Without the oversight that came with the major tech giants, LibertyNet struggled to moderate harmful content. Fake news spread faster than ever, hate speech flourished, and misinformation ran rampant. For every advocate of freedom, there were those who used the platform for more nefarious purposes. Musk had always been adamant that LibertyNet should remain open and unregulated, but the consequences of this openness were becoming clear. In public forums, the debate was no longer just about privacy or control, it was about the dangers of a completely unfiltered space. Calls for more regulation grew louder by the day. One such call came from Angela Franklin, a prominent human rights advocate who had initially supported Musk's initiative. Franklin had been one of the first public figures to endorse LibertyNet, seeing it as a beacon for free speech. However, as time passed, she became increasingly concerned by the platform's lack of safeguards. "We cannot stand by and watch as this platform is hijacked by hate groups, conspiracy theorists, and criminals," Franklin said in an impassioned speech at a press conference. "There's a line between freedom of speech and freedom to harm others. We must draw that line before it's too late." Her words echoed around the world, sparking protests and discussions about the role of social media platforms in society. It wasn't just about digital privacy anymore, it was about the very fabric of the digital public square. The world was divided. On one side were Musk supporters, who believed that LibertyNet was the only true path to a free and open internet. They argued that regulation would only empower the same corporate giants that had spent years manipulating data and suppressing free speech. On the other side were the critics, who warned that without rules, the internet would descend into chaos, a lawless space where anything goes, and no one was safe. As the conflict intensified, government intervention seemed imminent. Across the globe, lawmakers were considering new laws that would impose strict regulations on platforms like LibertyNet. Many saw the growing dangers of the platform as proof that regulation was necessary, even if it meant curtailing some aspects of digital freedom. Meanwhile, tech companies doubled down on their efforts to crush LibertyNet. Facebook, Google, and Apple had formed an unprecedented alliance, lobbying governments around the world to regulate Musk's platform. The tech giants argued that LibertyNet posed a direct threat to their business models and to the digital ecosystem as a whole. They pointed to rising incidents of cyberbullying, data breaches, and the proliferation of violent extremist content as proof that Musk's vision was too reckless. The tension reached a boiling point when the European Union announced it was moving forward with legislation that would force social media platforms to adhere to stricter content moderation policies. The proposed law, dubbed the Digital Responsibility Act, was designed to tackle the growing problem of harmful content online. It would require platforms like LibertyNet to take immediate action against hate speech, misinformation, and illegal activities. Failure to comply could result in heavy fines or, in extreme cases, the suspension of the platform's operations within the EU. Musk's reaction to the Digital Responsibility Act was swift and decisive. He took to social media, blasting the law as an infringement on the very principles of free speech and privacy. His tweet read, "If the EU wants to regulate free speech, then we'll build a platform where the people are in control. LibertyNet won't bow to anyone. This is about freedom. #digital freedom #no to censorship." But even as Musk fought back, the pressure mounted. The EU was not the only entity looking to rein in Musk's vision. In the United States, the FCC began an investigation into LibertyNet to determine whether it violated any existing communications laws. Several states, including California, introduced legislation that would force Musk's platform to comply with existing privacy and data protection standards. In the midst of mounting opposition, Musk began to play his trump card, his legal genius. Musk had always been known for his unorthodox strategies, but now, he was about to take things to a whole new level. As pressure from governments and tech companies reached a fever pitch, Musk began assembling a team of the world's best lawyers and tech policy experts. The goal, to find a legal loophole that would allow LibertyNet to exist without falling under the strict regulations that were being imposed. After weeks of intense work, Musk's legal team discovered something that had been overlooked by regulators, a provision in the Global Communications and Data Protection Treaty, an international treaty signed by many countries around the world, that allowed for a new kind of platform to exist outside the bounds of conventional regulation. The provision, written in broad terms, stated that decentralized networks and platforms operated by individuals, not corporations, were exempt from certain regulatory frameworks. It was a provision that had been intended for niche, experimental technologies, but Musk's legal team saw an opportunity. With this provision in hand, Musk's team went to court. They filed an emergency injunction to block the EU's Digital Responsibility Act from applying to LibertyNet, arguing that the platform's decentralized nature made it exempt from the new laws. The case was set to be heard in front of the International Court of Justice, and the world was watching. The outcome of this legal battle could determine the future of LibertyNet, and perhaps even the future of the Internet itself. On the day of the trial, Musk arrived at the International Court of Justice, flanked by his legal team. The courtroom was packed with journalists, activists, and representatives from various governments and tech companies. The tension in the room was palpable. Musk's lead attorney, a brilliant litigator named Sarah Goodman, presented their case with precision and clarity. She argued that LibertyNet was a new kind of platform, one that was entirely decentralized and operated by its users, not a corporation. This, she argued, meant that it fell outside the purview of traditional regulations. As the defense made its case, the EU's legal representatives fought back fiercely, arguing that LibertyNet was simply a platform created by Musk to skirt responsibility and accountability. They pointed to the growing concerns over harmful content on the platform and the potential dangers it posed to global security. The case stretched on for days, with each side presenting their arguments in painstaking detail. Finally, it was time for closing statements. Musk stood before the court, his demeanor calm but resolute. He spoke directly to the judges, his voice carrying across the room. "This is not just a case about LibertyNet," Musk said. "This is a case about the future of freedom in the digital age. We cannot allow corporate interests or government regulations to decide what we can and cannot say. We cannot let the power to control information rest in the hands of a few. The people deserve better." His words hung in the air as the courtroom fell silent. The final decision would be made soon. The days leading up to the verdict in the International Court of Justice were filled with tension. The world's eyes were firmly fixed on the courtroom, watching with bated breath as the fate of LibertyNet hung in the balance. For Elon Musk, this was the culmination of everything he had worked for, a chance to reshape the digital world in the image of his vision, a world where free speech, privacy, and decentralization reigned supreme. As the final day of deliberation arrived, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Delegates from various countries had gathered, some in support of Musk's revolutionary platform, others in staunch opposition, advocating for the regulation of digital spaces. The European Union, the United States, and a growing list of tech companies had all invested significant resources in this case, believing that the ruling could have far-reaching consequences not only for LibertyNet, but for the very framework of the Internet. Musk sat at the defense table, his usual calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing outside the court's doors. He had weathered criticism, threats, and legal battles for months, but this moment was different. This was the pivotal moment in the fight for digital freedom. After days of intense legal arguments, the judges finally gathered in the chambers to deliberate. The question was clear: could LibertyNet, a decentralized platform operated by its users and not a corporation, be exempt from international regulations that governed other social media companies? Was the Internet truly a space where individual freedoms should trump corporate control, or were regulations necessary to ensure safety, security, and the protection of vulnerable populations? The courtroom waited in near silence as the chief judge, a respected figure in international law, stood to deliver the verdict. The world's media captured the moment, and millions held their breath. "The court has considered the arguments presented by both sides," the judge began, her voice steady and authoritative. "After careful deliberation, we find in favor of LibertyNet." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Musk's supporters erupted in quiet applause, while the opposition sat stunned. The judge continued, "We acknowledge that the absence of central authority on a decentralized platform raises serious concerns regarding content moderation, user safety, and the spread of harmful material. However, it is the belief of this court that the principles of freedom of expression and data sovereignty cannot be undermined by overbearing regulation. We are entering a new era of digital interaction, and the laws must evolve with it. LibertyNet is a new model, a model that, at its core, promotes user empowerment. While there are risks associated with this model, it is not within the purview of this court to dictate the parameters of innovation. We urge LibertyNet and other similar platforms to adopt best practices in content moderation and security, but we believe that the fundamental right to digital freedom must be protected." The tension in the room was palpable. The ruling was a resounding victory for Musk and his supporters, but it was also a clarion call to action for the tech world. The battle for digital freedom had just entered a new phase, and there was no turning back. The ruling sent shockwaves throughout the digital world. Headlines around the globe trumpeted the victory for LibertyNet, heralding it as a major step forward in the fight for digital rights. Musk's platform, once a rebellious idea, was now the beacon of a new era, an era where users controlled their data and online experiences without corporate interference. For many, the ruling was a triumph of freedom over regulation. Advocates of digital privacy and free speech hailed the decision as a watershed moment in the fight against corporate surveillance. The ruling made it clear, the internet could no longer be owned by a few tech giants. It had to be a space where individuals, not corporations, had the final say over their online lives. Musk wasted no time in celebrating the victory. He took to LibertyNet, posting a simple message. Freedom won today. This is just the beginning. #LibertyNet, #digital freedom, #future is now. But as jubilant as Musk and his supporters were, the ruling also came with significant caveats. While the court had ruled in Musk's favor, it had made it clear that LibertyNet was expected to take greater responsibility in managing harmful content. The court had urged Musk to implement stronger safeguards to protect vulnerable users, particularly minors, from exploitation and abuse. It also recommended the platform adopt more robust data protection policies, though the court stopped short of mandating specific regulations. Musk responded quickly, acknowledging the court's concerns and vowing to take action. We will continue to innovate, and we will ensure that LibertyNet remains a safe space for everyone. The victory today is just the beginning of a journey. We will build a platform that is both free and secure. Despite the legal victory, the backlash against LibertyNet was far from over. The tech giants, Facebook, Google, and Twitter, weren't ready to concede defeat just yet. They immediately began lobbying for new international regulations that would specifically target decentralized platforms like LibertyNet. The goal was clear: they wanted to ensure that no platform could exist without corporate oversight. We cannot allow an unregulated space to exist on the internet, said Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, in a statement shortly after the ruling. Without oversight, we risk an internet that is unsafe, divisive, and chaotic. This ruling could set a dangerous precedent. Zuckerberg's sentiments were echoed by Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, who warned that without regulation, the internet would become a breeding ground for extremism, misinformation, and cybercrime. The safety of users is our top priority, Pichai said. We cannot afford to ignore the potential risks of an unregulated internet. The fight for regulation was now in full swing. As tech giants ramped up their efforts to push through new laws, governments around the world began to debate what kind of rules were necessary to ensure a safe and secure digital space. While the tech giants lobbied for more regulation, LibertyNet's users celebrated the decision. The platform's user base skyrocketed after the ruling, with millions flocking to LibertyNet in the hope of experiencing an internet that was truly free. We won. It's amazing, said Ben, a 32-year-old LibertyNet user. This is the internet we've been waiting for. A place where we can say what we want and share what we believe without someone deciding for us. We're finally in control. But not everyone shared Ben's optimism. Critics of LibertyNet warned that the platform's rapid growth could lead to unforeseen consequences. With fewer restrictions on content, they argued, LibertyNet could become a breeding ground for extremist views and harmful material. In a world where misinformation could spread like wildfire, some felt that Musk's vision was a dangerous gamble. You can't just build a platform and hope for the best, said Dr. Karen Liu, a professor of digital ethics. We need safeguards. We need accountability. Musk's decision to let the users police themselves is a recipe for disaster. The debate raged on, with passionate arguments on both sides. For some, LibertyNet represented the future of the internet, a place where individuals could thrive without the interference of corporate giants. For others, it was a ticking time bomb, a space where chaos and harm could reign unchecked. The moment the verdict was announced, the digital world seemed to hold its breath, suspended in a strange state of anticipation. While Elon Musk celebrated his win, a quiet storm was brewing in the boardrooms of the world's biggest tech giants. Facebook, Google, and Apple had lost this round, but they were not about to sit back and let Musk and his vision of LibertyNet dominate the internet. The fight for control of the digital landscape was about to enter a new phase, one marked by fierce lobbying, high-stakes legislation, and even deeper divides in public opinion. The tech giants, shaken by the court's decision, began to formulate their counterattacks. They weren't going to let Musk's decentralized utopia run free without consequences, especially when billions of dollars in profits were at stake. Almost immediately after the court's decision, the lobbying machines of Silicon Valley kicked into high gear. In Washington, D.C., lobbyists from Facebook, Google, and Apple flooded Capitol Hill, urging lawmakers to pass new regulations aimed squarely at platforms like LibertyNet. Their message was clear: Musk's victory had set a dangerous precedent. If left unchecked, the internet could descend into a chaotic, unregulated space where misinformation, hate speech, and cybercrime would flourish. The tech giants proposed a new regulatory framework, one that would force decentralized platforms like LibertyNet to adhere to some form of corporate oversight, no matter how loosely defined. They argued that platforms with such immense global reach could not be allowed to operate without any accountability. "We cannot stand by while the internet is overtaken by misinformation, hate groups, and criminal enterprises," said Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, in an impassioned statement at a press conference. The digital world needs regulation to ensure the safety and security of its users. But Musk was ready. He had anticipated this move and quickly mobilized his team of lawyers, activists, and supporters to push back. He had always known that LibertyNet would face immense opposition from the tech giants, and now it was time to play his hand. Musk took to LibertyNet, posting a statement that resonated deeply with his supporters. "The internet is ours. We will not allow corporate interests or governments to control our digital lives. LibertyNet will remain free, and we will fight for our rights every step of the way." The battle was no longer confined to the courtroom. It had become a global political struggle, one where Musk's revolutionary ideas were pitted against the entrenched power of the world's largest corporations. The tech giants weren't just lobbying in the United States. They were working hard to influence international lawmakers as well. In the European Union, the Digital Responsibility Act that had previously targeted LibertyNet was gaining traction once again. After the court ruling, European regulators were under tremendous pressure to create a framework that would control decentralized platforms. They argued that it was necessary to protect citizens from the dangerous content proliferating on LibertyNet. Angela Franklin, the human rights advocate who had once supported Musk's vision, emerged as one of the leading voices advocating for stronger regulations. She argued that while Musk's intentions might have been noble, the reality of a decentralized internet was proving to be far more harmful than helpful. The unchecked spread of misinformation and extremist content on LibertyNet had caused real-world harm, and she was determined to ensure that the platform didn't continue down this path. "We cannot ignore the consequences of an internet without rules," Franklin said in a public address. "There are lives at stake, and LibertyNet has become a tool for those who seek to harm others. It's time for real action." Her calls were echoed by governments around the world. The European Union, in particular, saw the growing influence of LibertyNet as a serious challenge to its authority. If platforms like LibertyNet continued to grow without regulation, there was a very real threat that they could undermine years of work in fighting online extremism, hate speech, and misinformation. As the pressure mounted, Musk doubled down. In an interview with LibertyNet's chief content officer, he addressed the growing concerns about the platform's lack of oversight. LibertyNet was never intended to be lawless. It was always about giving people the freedom to speak, to connect, and to create without the fear of corporate censorship. "We understand the concerns about harmful content, but regulation is not the answer. We are developing more sophisticated tools for content moderation, but we will not compromise on our commitment to privacy and free speech." Musk's team began working around the clock to improve the platform's moderation capabilities, implementing advanced artificial intelligence to detect and remove harmful content without compromising the privacy of its users. He was determined to prove that LibertyNet could be both free and safe. Meanwhile, his legal team was working behind the scenes to ensure that LibertyNet could continue to operate without the new regulations that were being proposed. They were preparing for a new round of legal battles, this time focused on challenging the proposed international laws that would force Musk to comply with stricter content moderation requirements. But as Musk prepared for the next stage of the fight, he began to realize that the stakes had grown much larger than he initially thought. The battle for LibertyNet was no longer just about freedom of speech, it was about the very future of the internet itself. The growing divide between those who supported Musk's vision and those who sought to regulate the internet was becoming more pronounced. As the battle raged on, the world found itself facing a new kind of digital civil war, a war between the forces of freedom and those of control. On one side were the advocates of free speech, privacy, and decentralization, those who believed that the internet should be a space where individuals could connect and communicate without the interference of corporations or governments. These individuals saw LibertyNet as the beginning of a new era, one where people could control their digital lives. On the other side were the tech giants, governments, and activists who believed that the internet needed to be regulated to protect its users from harm. They argued that without regulation, the internet would descend into chaos, with extremist ideologies and dangerous content proliferating unchecked. This digital divide was no longer just a matter of policy, it was a cultural and ideological battle. The question at stake was whether the internet would remain a space for unfiltered free expression or whether it would be reshaped into a controlled, sanitized environment where only approved voices were heard. As the battle between these two sides escalated, it became clear that the world was on the cusp of a new era. The decisions made in the coming months would have profound implications not only for LibertyNet, but for the entire digital landscape. Would the internet remain a space of free expression, or would it become just another tool for corporate and governmental control? For Musk, the stakes had never been higher. He had won a major legal victory, but the fight was far from over. If he wanted to ensure that LibertyNet would thrive, he would have to navigate the storm of regulation, public opinion, and corporate opposition. But Musk was nothing if not resilient. He knew that this was the moment to define the future of the internet, a future that would either be marked by freedom or control. The storm that had been brewing in the tech world for months finally reached its boiling point. The verdict in favor of LibertyNet had sparked the beginning of a new chapter, but now, the fight for the future of the internet was heading into uncharted waters. As Musk and his team worked tirelessly to defend their platform, new forces were aligning against them, forces not only of legal opposition but of public skepticism. Musk had achieved a monumental victory, but the subsequent months revealed just how fragile that victory truly was. The waves of regulatory challenges, corporate interests, and activist groups only intensified. As the digital divide between the defenders of free speech and the proponents of regulation grew, the stakes couldn't have been higher. In the midst of the battle, Elon Musk found himself at a crossroads. For the first time in months, he questioned whether LibertyNet was truly the force of good he had envisioned. Every decision now carried weight. The platform, which had once been a bold expression of his desire for a freer, more open internet, was now a lightning rod for controversy. His legal team worked around the clock to fend off the latest round of regulatory proposals, while his public relations team tried to navigate the storm of backlash. Musk's confidence remained unshaken on the outside, but privately, he found himself exhausted. The constant barrage of attacks, the unrelenting pressure to maintain his position in the face of growing opposition, it was beginning to take its toll. In a quiet moment, Musk sat alone in his office overlooking the vast expanse of Silicon Valley. The glow of his computer screen illuminated his face as he scrolled through messages of support and condemnation alike. He had fought for the freedom of the internet, but now he wondered if he had underestimated the complexity of the battle. The room felt smaller than usual, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. Musk closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair, reflecting on how far he had come. He had achieved greatness in so many fields: electric cars, space exploration, artificial intelligence, but the digital frontier was different. It was a battleground unlike any he had faced before. Maybe this is the price of progress, he muttered to himself. As Musk wrestled with his doubts, public opinion continued to shift. While LibertyNet supporters were fiercely loyal, the platform's rapid rise had also attracted a large number of critics. What had once been a space of free expression was now being seen by some as a breeding ground for extremism and divisive rhetoric. The more unmoderated content flooded the platform, the more LibertyNet's critics grew in strength. In the wake of several high-profile incidents involving harmful content spreading unchecked across LibertyNet, calls for regulation intensified. Politicians from both sides of the aisle began to recognize the potential dangers of an unregulated internet. And as more and more world leaders voiced their concerns, the pressure on Musk to address these issues grew. The U.S. government, once supportive of Musk's innovation, began to wobble. Senators and congresspeople, many of whom had once seen the platform as a beacon of digital freedom, now voiced concerns about LibertyNet's role in perpetuating the spread of fake news and hate speech. The calls for accountability were getting louder. The internet is supposed to be a place for innovation and progress, not a breeding ground for hatred, said Senator Eleanor Brooks in a passionate speech to the media. The way LibertyNet operates right now is irresponsible. We need to step in before it gets out of hand. In a dramatic turn of events, the tech giants, Facebook, Google, and Amazon, joined forces to create a new coalition, one focused on preserving the integrity of the internet. This coalition, backed by significant lobbying power, aimed to push through new legislation that would introduce strict oversight on decentralized platforms like LibertyNet. The tech giants argued that there needed to be a balance between freedom and responsibility in the digital world. Behind closed doors, industry leaders began to strategize. Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, and Jeff Bezos held secret meetings to align their interests, plotting their next steps. The time had come for them to fight back, not just to protect their businesses, but to maintain control over the future of the internet itself. We can't let Musk redefine the internet, Zuckerberg said, his voice low with resolve. The digital world must be safe. There has to be oversight, or we risk everything. Pichai nodded in agreement. It's not just about controlling content. It's about ensuring that the internet remains a space where everyone can thrive. LibertyNet is an experiment in anarchy. And anarchy is dangerous. The coalition pushed for new laws that would essentially give governments and corporations greater control over decentralized platforms, forcing them to adhere to stricter regulations on content and user behavior. They argued that LibertyNet's decentralized nature was an unregulated Wild West that needed to be tamed. Despite the mounting pressure, Musk remained resolute. He refused to back down. But as the battle continued to intensify, he realized that he had to make a decision. Was he willing to compromise some of his principles in order to protect LibertyNet, or would he continue to fight for complete freedom at all costs? The digital war had now become personal. It was no longer just about technology, it was about the very ideals Musk had staked his career on. Was it worth sacrificing some of those ideals to ensure that LibertyNet would survive? Could he strike a balance between freedom and responsibility? In a series of private meetings with his top advisors and legal team, Musk started to consider a new strategy. He knew he couldn't face down the tech giants and governments alone. But he also understood that he could not afford to lose the trust of LibertyNet's millions of users. His next move would be critical. Musk gathered his team together for a meeting at LibertyNet's headquarters. "We need to adjust our strategy," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We've been playing the freedom card, but we also need to show the world that we can be responsible. If we want to win this, we need to prove that we can be both free and safe. And we'll do it on our terms." The world watched in anticipation as the battle for the future of the internet reached its boiling point. Elon Musk, the mastermind behind LibertyNet, stood at the center of a storm, an isolated figure, his every move scrutinized by tech giants, politicians, and users alike. The pressure was immense, and the weight of the decisions he had to make felt heavier than ever. Yet, Musk had always thrived in chaos, and now, with the fate of his digital empire hanging in the balance, he prepared for his boldest move yet. Musk had spent weeks quietly working on a plan that would shift the tide in his favor. It wasn't a legal loophole or a political alliance he was seeking. Instead, he was turning to the most powerful force in the digital age, the people. The public outcry had reached a fever pitch. Supporters of LibertyNet rallied online, posting impassioned messages of defiance against the calls for regulation. But this support wasn't just about defending a platform, it was about defending a new vision for the internet itself. People saw LibertyNet as a symbol of their ability to express themselves freely, without the constraints of corporate control or government intervention. Musk had always believed in the power of individuals to bring about change, and now, he was going to harness that power. He announced a bold new initiative, a massive global campaign designed to put public pressure on lawmakers and corporations alike. His plan was simple but brilliant: if the regulators wanted to control LibertyNet, they would have to go through the people who used it. The campaign, called #FreeTheNet, encouraged users to make their voices heard. Millions of LibertyNet users, along with supporters from around the world, began flooding social media platforms, public forums, and government websites with messages demanding that their voices be respected. It was a massive digital movement, and it was growing by the hour. We are the Internet. We are the future. And we won't let anyone take that away from us, Musk tweeted, kicking off the campaign with a message that would resonate across the globe. As the #FreeTheNet campaign gained momentum, the response from tech giants and regulators was swift and intense. The corporate coalition led by Zuckerberg, Pichai, and Bezos ramped up their efforts to quell the uprising. Their lobbyists worked overtime in Washington and Brussels, pushing for the passage of new laws that would force LibertyNet to comply with strict content moderation and oversight requirements. They portrayed Musk as a reckless entrepreneur who was putting the safety of the digital world at risk. "It's a fight for the soul of the Internet," said Mark Zuckerberg in an interview. "We cannot let a single individual undermine the progress we've made. The Internet needs to be a space where trust and safety come first." But Musk wasn't intimidated. His move was working. The public, galvanized by the campaign, began to push back harder than ever. Users who had previously been silent now stood up in defense of LibertyNet. In interviews, town halls, and online forums, they voiced their unwavering support for Musk's vision of a free and open Internet. "I've never felt like I had a voice in the digital world until I found LibertyNet," said one user in a viral video. "It's the only platform where I can speak freely, without fear of being censored. I stand with Musk." And with that, a digital revolution had begun. The very people who had once been passive consumers of technology were now active participants in the fight for the future of the Internet. Musk knew that this was the moment to go all in. He took to LibertyNet for a live broadcast, an unprecedented move. His audience, numbering in the millions, tuned in to hear the man who had redefined the tech landscape. This wasn't just another announcement. This was a direct message to the world. "Good evening," Musk began, his voice calm but powerful. "We are standing at a crossroads. What we do in the next few days will determine the future of the Internet, for better or for worse. But this is not a fight just for LibertyNet. This is a fight for freedom itself." He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in. The tech giants, the governments, and the regulators want to control the Internet. They want to tell you what you can say, what you can see, and who you can be. They want to take away the freedom we've fought so hard for. But we will not let them. Musk's words resonated with his viewers, sending waves of support across the digital landscape. This was not just about technology. This was about freedom, expression, and the right to shape the future. And Musk was positioning himself as the figurehead of that movement. LibertyNet was created to give people the freedom to speak and connect without fear of censorship. That will never change. But we also understand that with freedom comes responsibility. We are working on new tools and strategies to ensure that our platform remains a safe and welcoming space for all users. It was a masterstroke. Musk had positioned himself not just as a tech CEO, but as the champion of a global movement for digital freedom. And the world was listening. As the #FreeTheNet campaign reached its zenith, the legal battles intensified. The coalition of tech giants and regulatory bodies launched a final, all-out effort to shut down LibertyNet or force Musk to comply with their demands. But Musk, backed by the overwhelming support of millions of users, fought back with a legal counterattack of his own. His legal team, already legendary for their previous victories, presented an airtight case. They argued that the very nature of the Internet was built on the principles of decentralization, freedom of expression, and innovation. Any attempt to impose centralized control over platforms like LibertyNet would set a dangerous precedent that could undermine the entire foundation of the digital age. For Musk, it was clear, this was the last battle in a war for the future of the Internet. But with his global movement behind him, he felt more confident than ever. The courts, as much as governments and corporations, would have to listen. The battle had reached its final, critical moment. Elon Musk stood in a starkly lit conference room, his face illuminated only by the glow of the screens that lined the walls, each one displaying an endless stream of live updates from court hearings, news outlets, and LibertyNet itself. The court case, which would determine the fate of his platform, and perhaps the future of digital freedom, was drawing to a close. The forces of regulation and control had thrown everything they had at Musk, and now it was time for the last play. The world was watching, waiting for the verdict that would reverberate across the globe. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. On one side sat Musk's legal team, poised and confident, despite the weight of the moment. On the other, the combined forces of corporate giants and regulators, their lawyers working tirelessly to dismantle Musk's defense. The stakes could not have been higher. The judge, a respected figure known for her impartiality, had spent weeks deliberating on the case. Every argument had been made. Every piece of evidence had been presented. Now, it was time for her final ruling. This case, she began, her voice steady and authoritative, has far-reaching implications not only for the defendant, but for the very future of the Internet. It is my responsibility to weigh the fundamental question of whether the principles of free expression and the power of individual choice outweigh the need for regulation and oversight in our increasingly complex digital world. Musk sat calmly at the defendant's table, his hands folded in front of him. His face was unreadable, but his eyes gleamed with determination. This was it. The moment he had been preparing for. I understand the concerns about safety, Musk continued, when given the chance to address the court one final time. But LibertyNet is not about ignoring responsibility. It's about giving people the power to make their own decisions. It's about freedom, and the preservation of that freedom is the only way forward. If we let governments and corporations control what we see and say, we lose the very essence of the Internet. There was a long pause. The judge nodded thoughtfully, her gaze shifting between the opposing sides. The courtroom was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the judge spoke. I have carefully reviewed all the arguments and the overwhelming public response to this case. This is not a decision I take lightly. However, in light of the Constitution's guarantee of free speech and the vast implications for future innovation and expression, I am ruling in favor of LibertyNet. A collective gasp filled the courtroom as Musk's legal team exchanged glances of disbelief, but their smiles quickly replaced the shock. Musk, too, stood there for a moment, processing the significance of the moment. The battle had been won. The judge continued, however, this ruling is not without caveats. LibertyNet must implement reasonable measures to ensure the safety and well-being of its users, especially minors, and prevent illegal activity. These regulations must be in place within the next 6 months. Failure to comply will result in further legal action. It wasn't a total victory, there were still conditions to meet. But it was a monumental win in the larger war. Musk had successfully defended the core of LibertyNet's philosophy, a free and open Internet. The verdict sent shockwaves throughout the world. Headlines flashed across news outlets in every corner of the globe. Elon Musk wins court battle, free speech triumphs over regulation. LibertyNet secures historic victory for digital freedom. The future of the Internet has been decided, Musk's platform defeats the regulators. It wasn't just a legal win, it was a victory for the millions of users who had fought for their rights to free expression. The hashtag #FreeTheNet campaign had brought together people from all walks of life, united in their belief that the Internet should remain a space for innovation, creativity, and debate. Musk's vision had been validated, but the road ahead was far from easy. The world was changing rapidly, and with this victory came even greater responsibilities. As he celebrated the outcome, Musk understood the delicate balance that LibertyNet now had to maintain. He would need to implement the necessary safety measures, to ensure that freedom didn't lead to harm. But Musk was confident that with the right tools and the right mindset, LibertyNet could continue to be a force for good, upholding the values of free speech while fostering a safe environment for all users. As the news of the victory spread, Musk found himself reflecting on the bigger picture. This legal battle had been about more than just a platform, it had been about the very future of the Internet. In a world where tech giants and governments increasingly sought to control digital spaces, Musk had shown that there was still room for a platform that placed its faith in the people. The victory was a personal triumph, but it also marked the beginning of a new era. The digital world would no longer be solely shaped by corporate interests or government oversight, it would be shaped by the people who used it. Musk took a moment to breathe, his mind racing with possibilities. LibertyNet had won, but now the real work began. The responsibility to safeguard the freedom of the Internet, while ensuring that it remained a safe space for all, was a challenge like no other. But Musk had always thrived on challenges. "It's just the beginning," he whispered to himself, looking out at the sprawling horizon of Silicon Valley from his office window. The future was wide open. In the wake of the ruling, LibertyNet's success sparked a ripple effect around the world. Other countries, watching the unfolding drama, began to reconsider their own policies on Internet regulation. Musk's victory was seen not just as a personal triumph, but as a beacon of hope for those who believed in the power of the Internet as a force for good. Governments and regulators began to reframe their approach. The idea of a free and open Internet, with reasonable safeguards in place, began to gain traction. While some countries remained resolutely in favor of stricter regulations, others began to adopt more balanced approaches, recognizing that a free Internet could coexist with necessary protections. And across the digital landscape, new platforms and voices emerged, inspired by Musk's vision. The fight for the future of the Internet was far from over, but the course had been set. The people had won. With the victory in court, Musk's dream of a free and open Internet was secured, for now. But the real challenge was just beginning. The fight for the soul of the Internet had sparked a global movement, and it was clear that the future of digital freedom would be shaped by those who dared to dream big. As for Musk, he knew that this was only one chapter in a much larger story. The Internet was still young, and the path ahead was full of possibilities, some thrilling, others uncertain. But one thing was for sure, the future of the Internet would never be the same again. Musk had won the battle. But the war for the future of the digital world was just beginning. And LibertyNet, the platform he had fought so hard to protect, would be at the center of it all. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?